So I wanted to introduce myself a little bit. My name's Jay Ray. I work at College Library at the University of Wisconsin-Madison within the Computer and Media Center is what we're called, the CMC. And I've been in the role as Technology Operations Manager for about a year and a quarter now. This was one of the first real projects that I had taken under my own ownership. There have been a couple other things that I've done outside of this scope, of course, and by a couple I mean a ton, but this was one of those things where I thought there might be broad appeal. So I went ahead and put it out there for the MacAdmins conference, and they thought that there would be enough, and sure enough, here you all are. I have a background in mechanical engineering. I went to Valparaiso University in Indiana, and that's not technology. I didn't have a degree in technology until just a few years ago when I got my master's in it. But I always had a passion for customer service, and I had a passion for efficiency. And so when looking at a brand new job as the technology operations manager, I walked in and focused on what can we be more efficient at, and that's how this all began. As a side note, I've been reading a book recently that talks about active versus contemplative life, and how technology has really made us more active and less contemplative. We don't stop enough to look internally and solve the problems internally before we try and react to what's out. And of course, we all do customer service in some way, shape, or form. We all do problem solving. And so we are very reactive people. And this was the rare opportunity to take what I considered a reactive measure in terms of efficiency and change it into the action of learning, the action of providing better customer service, and so on and so forth. And I want to make it clear, I've tried to include a lot of the people that helped me along the way, student workers and things of that nature. This was obviously not a one-man thing, but we can only send one person. And so I want to make sure you realize this is a team effort, and you need a team in order to be able to take care of all the ins and outs, especially when you get to a final product that is on a daily driver. And then finally, as I said, I really didn't have any way of knowing that this would have broad appeal, but in saying that, I want to make it clear that I'll give you anecdotal evidence of the steps that I've taken to get to our final setup. But I wasn't taking notes that entire time. There was not that foresight. And so I can't give you details necessarily. I've done my best here, but the final project, hopefully you will learn from my successes more than you would have from the failures that took place over the course of about 6 months. So before we get too far along, I kind of wanted to get a lay of the land of who all of you are. And I thought I would be able to just say, how many of you have been to, say, UW-Madison, and have you all raise your hands? Okay, a few. And then I realized, no, the majority of people in this room probably haven't even been to Wisconsin. Oh, okay, more, okay, all right. And then I thought, well, would I have to actually take a step back and say how many people have actually heard of the Midwest? Okay, all right, sorry. So I asked how many people have been to UW-Madison, a couple. How many of you work in a library setting? Is there anybody? Okay, 1, 2, okay. And how many of you work in a lending environment, one in which you check out any kind of equipment, not just iPads? Okay, a few more. Okay, kind of most people. You know, some people did a little hand wave at me. So that'll work. And then have any of you attempted to tackle this particular issue before? Okay. Utilizing, say, MDMs or DEPs. There are other sessions on that, so I don't want to steal their thunder necessarily. But this was first and foremost a project that allowed me to utilize what Apple provides with some caveats, of course. And so we'll get into that. So now again, we know each other, so we can go ahead and move on. All right, really? Connection lost? That's fun. Oh, Keynote just dropped. That's fun. Oh my gosh. All right. Let's try that again, shall we? Looks like I'm not going to be able to use my remote. There we go. Hey, okay. Instead of like the general overview slide where I tell you the like specific slide titles and then you see them again, although some of these I have reused as slide titles, so don't hold that against me. But I thought I would go through the questions that I would try to answer during this session. So who are we? College Library, I already said that's where I work, although I work at a number of other libraries on the campus at UW-Madison, but College Library is where I do the majority of my work. So who are we as College Library? What makes us unique? Why is this even appealing to as many of you as it is? And what makes our particular situation potentially slightly different or drastically different from what you might encounter? How did this project begin? You know, I've already talked about the fact that I'm really into efficiency, so you have that background, but what's the nitty-gritty on it? What did we change about the process that we were using and why? Pretty self-explanatory. And then what have we learned throughout the process? And I'll try and leave between 10 and 15 minutes at the end for questions. I can't guarantee 10 to 15 minutes. Don't hold me to that either. All right, so who are we? We have, in my mind, two identities, College Library. We are one of the larger libraries on campus. We technically serve everyone. We serve the public, we serve freshmen through seniors, graduate students, whatever. But we consider ourselves a home library for our freshmen and sophomore students because we don't have connections with any particular college. So we're not the engineering library, we're not the math library, we are a general purpose, research-based library. We provide bibliographic research access and experienced librarians. We also have 24, as we call it, 5+ operations. So we are open 24 hours a day, Sunday through Friday, I should say. And then Fridays and Saturdays, we have limited hours, because there's simply less use. Now, during finals week, we actually do go to a true 24/7 model, and that definitely makes us unique, at least on our campus. We're one of the only ones that do provide a 24-hour place for people to come and study that's safe, that provides them still really services throughout the day. And then we have kind of an internal identity. The teaching library, we have a number, I'll talk about our student worker processes, but we also have reference student assistants, we have internships, we have I'm going to forget the name, but we provide, in other words, jobs for people to be able to grow into potentially a career or simply a way of learning new things. Obviously, a lot of people know technology, at least at a baseline, so we at the CMC provide the ability to grow within that, even if their career path won't necessarily help them to then grow past where we get them. And then finally, we're considered like a beta tester library or a pilot library. So we are able to take new technologies for potential rollout and test them for other libraries on campus, services for campus-wide use. It really spans the gamut. And of course, these two goals kind of blend well together from the technology perspective in that we have students we're teaching that can offer ownership or take ownership of new technologies and processes as we're testing them, and then bring a project from conception to completion. And that's great for their morale as well as learning what goes into creating these types of services or upgrading these types of services. So that's who we are. Now, why us? What makes us unique? Is the question that I'm trying to answer here. Obviously, we're a library. We have a culture of lending, therefore, books and magazines, and we actually are the only place that provides recreational materials, games, DVDs, recreational reading books, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Technology was first brought into that culture through laptops, which is a program that is alive and well today. We circulate currently about 250 laptops, but that's just from our location. We also have multiple locations around campus that do exactly that. We also check out, still cameras, video cameras, audio recording equipment, projectors, gaming consoles, equipment we're testing for broader rollout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on, really. And in addition, we provide reservable versions of all of the different technologies that we have. So if someone needs to, say, take a GoPro to Cuba, which, just recently became legal, they can do that. They can reserve it for a week, they can take it with them, and they can use it to their heart's content. Again, something that really does, in my mind, make us unique. And then, of course, the iPad, which is the whole point of all of this. The iPads were added to the long list of technologies a little after the first-gen iPad was released. We now check out iPad 2s and iPad Airs, and we currently have about 65 units in general circulation. A side note, we have used the exact same checkout procedure until now for those iPads. So 4+ years, we were utilizing the old system, and as you'll see, the old system was less than efficient, and in some ways less than effective. And then finally, we talk about budgets and things like that, and whenever you're working on a new project like this, there is the assumption that it's going to cost something. So inevitably in a meeting, it comes up like, how much is this going to really cost me? And my thought was, it shouldn't cost us anything in terms of hardware costs. I should be able to come up with a solution as a problem-solving technology person that can fit our desired results without causing us too much issue with economics or legality or any of that. So I was trying to reuse old equipment as much as humanly possible. And I'll get into how I did that in a second here. One other thing on the why us, we don't own the technology that we circulate. We partnership with an entity within the Department of Information Technology called InfoLabs. They provide us with our lab machines, dual boot iMacs throughout. They also provide us with our images. They're central IT as far as I'm concerned. And they buy all the laptops, all the iPads, all of that because it's under the InfoLabs umbrella. What that means, of course, is we don't have the ability to do device enrollment program, at least as easily. There is potential that we could, but that would take a lot of discussing, and we didn't have time. And in addition, we already own these. There's no way to retroactively enroll devices like that. And therefore, no device enrollment. No easy, I should have put in parentheses, easy activation unlock, because again, I'd have to go through at least 2 or 3 rings to get someone who actually had the purchase order for these iPads to then give to Apple, and then I guess it takes like a week from there for someone from Apple to call you back and say, oh yeah, now we've got this 128-bit encrypted activation unlock code. So activation lock was a problem for us. And then no mobile device management, and I say that not to be obtuse, but to simply point out that there's upfront cost with that. I would have had to have many more conversations in order to get the funding for that. So I decided that mobile device managers, at least the ones that I had tested in trial versions, simply weren't going to work, especially in the short term. And of course, with all of these caveats, there is potential for future rollout that would include some of those things. So the student worker program is what makes the CMC run. You know, what makes the laptop checkout viable, the iPad checkout viable, all of these things. So I feel like in order to understand how we got into this, you really have to understand how we run our help desk. And I say help desk, but it's really support for library services specifically. They don't get calls about someone can't log into AD or something, you know, and just to clear that up. And I will continue to call it a help desk because it's just easier. So we have a student worker program that consists of several distinct levels for our student workers. They start at a beginner level or level 1, which is basically a probationary level. And then throughout their time working with us, they can work up, and if they show enough prowess and enough technical acumen, they can potentially become a lead student in that. We only have 6 leads at a time, so that's a pretty coveted position, especially for the people that are even remotely interested in it. And they're good. They basically run our help desk. There is very little full-time staff member involvement in our daily operations, and of course that's mainly because we are a 24/7 operation. There are ways to staff that full-time, but the library doesn't even staff full-time staff members 24/7. So I'm always on call, is how it works, I guess. Let's see, they run our various services, checking out equipment to patrons of the library, running poster printing services. We have large format printers that we provide to our students. They also work with technologies we're currently looking to roll into our service model. So right now, let's see, we're working on getting an Oculus Rift into our students' hands. We're working on getting 3D printing into our students' hands. These are things that we're currently just researching, but the potential exists that our students would become the service point for those things. We would, you know, at some point step back, they would create the documentation, they would take ownership. I feel like the setup gives us special insights into the services we should add, current and future pain points at each of those service points, as well as, of course, to simplify their jobs, we go ahead and try and document as much as possible. We provide very specific guidelines as well for each of the processes and job duties so that there's no question as to how to image a MacBook or how to refresh an iPad now. Let's see. So the next thing is the ways that we communicate with our student workers. So I said document. We use Confluence as kind of a twofold device, our wiki and a blogging service for all intents and purposes to allow for dissemination of new information. So the blog is updated on a pretty much constant basis with new questions that have cropped up. And again, we can post to the blog or we can post to the wiki, but we really want to push ownership onto our students because if they write it for themselves, it's going to help them to understand it moving forward. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about training and therefore also retraining. We provide a spring refresher every semester, or I should say every semester we provide a refresher that allows for returning students to be refreshed and obviously not have to go back through and read all the wiki articles again and those types of things. And then in addition, we have kind of a full training session that is a full day or day and a half right before the fall semester starts for currently just new students, but we're revamping that to take into account everyone since a full summer away potentially means that they've forgotten quite a bit. And then, as I had talked about, we provide promotion and growth opportunities. They can feel free to also tell us about potential projects for the future, and then we can simply say, go ahead, take it, you know, go for it. So, I don't expect you to read this. Don't worry. I will read it to you verbatim, though, because this is very important in how we communicate with our students. This is what I call the old process, This is 9 steps to check in an iPad. So this was also the first time that I even remotely, it came across my desk that we were doing it this way, and this was the harbinger to my inevitable OCD-ness to say, we got to get this down to like 1 or 2 clicks at maximum. So I'm going to read this in its entirety. This was written by one of our student leads on July 12th of 2014, and after I'm done, I'll go through a couple of the items that I feel are very important. Just a gentle reminder to make sure you are resetting all iPads before the patron walks away and before the item is discharged. I've seen a couple of iPads that have not been properly reset, and we can't use them until we have contacted the last patron. We have no way of resetting an iPad without the passcode, and I believe she meant activation lock as well. So make sure that you have done all the steps before discharging an iPad. Below are the steps. 1. Turn on the iPad using the power button on the top right corner of the device. 2. Have patron enter passcode if applicable. 3. Open settings, which can typically be found on the front page of the iPad. 4. Click General on the left-hand side of the settings menu. 5. Scroll to the very bottom on the right side of the screen and click Reset. I mean, obviously you guys know this process, so I apologize for reading this to you, but it's important. 6. Click Erase All Content and Settings, which should be the second option on the right-hand side of the screen. 7. A pop-up will appear labeled Erase iPad. Click Erase. 8. Another pop-up will appear labeled Erase iPad, asking if you are sure you want to do this. Click Erase again. 9, if the patron has logged in with their Apple ID, an additional pop-up will appear. Have the patron enter their Apple ID password if applicable. After all of these steps, the screen will turn dark and a silver apple will appear on the center of the screen. This tells you the iPad is being reset and it is okay to discharge the item and let the patron leave as long as the case, cover, and 2-piece charger are all returned with the iPad. So I wanted to just show you, we have a case. Inside the case is an iPad charger, as you would expect. We have a case that goes over the iPad. I'm actually using this iPad as a result. And then we also have the ability to check out Bluetooth keyboards if they would prefer to use an iPad versus a full-size keyboard, or a full-size computer. So that's what she's talking about when she says check that everything is there. So, couple of things. First things first. This was written on July 12th of 2014. And as I told you, we started with the first-gen iPads. So this was potentially 4 years, or possibly more than 4 years, after we had started to include iPads into our general circulation. It shouldn't need to be spelled out like this. But there's obviously a very good reason for that, and I'll talk about that in a second. As I already talked about, we didn't own the iPad, so we couldn't deal with activation unlock if these were discharged and without going through this process first. Did you notice how, it's extremely granular. The details are all there. And if you've never touched an iPad before in your life, you should potentially need that type of detail. But you really shouldn't need that type of detail if you're working a help desk situation. Because I should be able to tell the majority of my students, do a factory reset, and they would be able to do it without even thinking about it. Even if they are level 1, this is technology that they've had for the entirety of their lives, even the youngest one. So it feels like there's something to it there. They need more hand-holding than is worth. So why change? Customer service. What is the customer, the patron that is actually trying to return that iPad, what are they doing while this entire process is going on? They're just standing there. They're just waiting. That's not good customer service. And in addition, anyone that lines up after them, you have a 10-line person, the customer service angle is you try and get them through as much as humanly possible. And so if this takes, say, 5 minutes at the low end, it could potentially take 10 to 15 minutes if someone doesn't know what they're doing. And that's unacceptable to Ease of use. It's hard for our patrons to remember all of that if they try to remember it verbatim like I just read it to you. Human error. If they didn't do it correctly, we have an iPad that for all intents and purposes simply won't work. And we have to go through the process of calling the patron, and it all feeds back to customer service. The patron needs to come back in, enter their Apple password, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Security. We have our students entering a passcode, and how many of us use the same passcode for multiple devices? So we have students entering in a passcode, and then we have students entering in their iCloud information. They have to trust us a lot. And thank God they can. But that's not secure either. And if it's not done properly and there's no passcode, that iPad could be checked back out with that person's iCloud information. And there are things you can do with iCloud without ever logging in. So, security is a real problem. Consistency. One thing I didn't mention earlier is we check out MacBooks. I did mention that. What I didn't mention is our students actually re-image those laptops. They go through the process of net booting and making sure everything runs okay and those types of things. It's their ownership of that. And so we wanted to provide a consistent method for resetting our devices so that we could say, you've already learned the time-intensive process of re-imaging a MacBook. Now check this out. This is basically the exact same process. Plug it in and refresh it. So we're not teaching them yet another thing that they have to do. And then software updating. Not sure if you noticed, but a black screen with a silver apple is at least iOS 6. And that was already July of 2014. So these should have been on iOS 7 by now, these iPads. And they weren't. And iOS 8 had been announced, at least, at that point. So, software updating was a big issue. We had inconsistency across them because we had really fully functional iPads. Students could go ahead and update the software on their particular iPad that they check out. So then our full reset leaves it at iOS 7. We have iOS 6 devices. There's just no consistency there. And so all of this, of course, kind of goes under the umbrella of customer service. The more streamlined processes that we can provide, the better for how we look to our customer. So why not change? What took so long for us to figure this out? And I just summed it up thusly. Administrative overhead, it's a big issue. Because we don't own the iPads, it means manual registration with a particular Mac Mini in order to utilize Apple Configurator in the way that we did. And retraining, muscle memory and things like that, those can be hard things to retrain. And so, especially for our students that have been doing this since the first generation iPad. So I believe my predecessor probably butted up against that quite a bit as well. So what's our desired result? A clean OS install with an updated OS in one click or less with a consistent experience. And again, that's consistency for our patrons as well as our student workers, and a fully functional iPad. So keep in mind there's the caveat that if you're trying to do, say, apps or things of that nature, this is the bare minimum that we could potentially do. We wanted a clean OS install because our students are perfectly okay with that. The moment they start asking for apps to be installed and things, we'll have to cross that bridge. Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the patrons actually own and administer the iPad for the 3 days that we check it out to them, and then they bring it back and it's fully factory reset and then checked out to someone else. So, the process. I had to register an initial iPad. This was, clean Apple Configurator. I really hadn't worked with it before except for a couple of times just playing around with it. So I registered that iPad, I supervised it, and I'll go through the settings of that here in a little bit. I set up the iPad both in a profile that is installed on the iPad as well as settings that you can't do through the profile, you have to do on the device itself. I then backed up the iPad and I tested and repeated. So again, this is where it's anecdotal. I know there were things where I registered an iPad and then I had to unsupervise it in order to get past a roadblock and those types of things. But again, I didn't really take notes on those specifics. But this is how we are doing it now. So registering an iPad, again, manually with Apple Configurator, setting up the iPad with a profile as well as settings on the device, backing up that device, and then testing the refresh process and making sure that everything holds. And we've now used this process with 2 separate iPads, obviously iPad models, iPad 2 and iPad Air. We also use iPad 2s for our study room displays that show what's upcoming in our study rooms, kind of like the situation that they have here, the MCP. And it, counts down to the next session and so on and so forth in front of our study room. So I did that as well. I've now updated all of those iPads with this type of configuration as well. And then finally, the most time-intensive task is the register each iPad. So we have 65 iPads in total. Mainly, it's give or take 15 because of maintenance and repair and those types of things. But we had to register each iPad by hand, and the way that we wanted to do it was to have each iPad be named its name within the system. So that was also more time intensive. So I wanted to talk about the specifics of Apple Configurator, so I have a few screenshots over the course of the next few slides. Obviously the name, again, we did iPad Air, I think it's 41 through 80 or 40 through 79. So we have 40 iPad Airs that we circulate. So each time we wanted to prepare a device, we actually had to stop the preparation, change that name field, plug in the new iPad, and prepare it. So that's why it was so time intensive. If we had started from 1 and worked our way to 65, we could have just as easily hit that checkbox that says number sequentially starting at 1, and then you just plug in every iPad and it prepares it. That would have taken way less time for us, but that's simply not how our system worked. And in the future, hopefully what we'll be able to do is start from 1 again. Supervision is on, obviously. Yeah.
Did you guys use like individual ones connecting them to a cable, or did you use a box?
No, we didn't have a box at the time. So yeah, this was individual iPads being connected to a Mac Mini through a USB port. Yeah, unfortunate. So Supervision is on. We want, again, fully functional iPads, so we allow devices to be connected to other Macs. We restore from that backup that I was talking about. College Checkout iPad is the backup that I created. And then we have a profile, and I'll go into the profile here in a couple of slides. Checkout iPad profile. This is just for fun. I wanted to show you what we put in the organizational info, and you have to put organizational info in order for it to work. There's no way around that. So if you turn on Supervision, I believe this sheet actually pops up right away. And then there's setup. We didn't really have to worry about this because we're restoring from a backup, but if you want people to be able to go through the setup process, this is where you can actually skip specific ones. So in the profile, turn on location services, and then you no longer need to trust whoever you're loaning it out to go through that location services question within the setup process. So a couple of preferences that are interesting. During the process of actually testing this setup, I turned off automatically refresh because that could really screw you up. If you've made all these changes on an iPad, you plug it in and it resets it. And then when supervised devices refresh, remove apps and profiles configurator did not install. That's important if there are security certificates whoever you're loaning it out to would in fact install, and those types of things. Extra profiles for beta testing, etc. And then play sound on completion, and I'll talk about that in a little bit because it was kind of a problem for us initially. And then the lock screen, we actually have the device name show up at the bottom there, and we have the Wisconsin W as our background. And we created that based on the background of our MacBooks as well. So there's kind of a consistency angle to it as well. It's easily identifiable as ours. And of course, the student can change that to their heart's content if they want. But each time it's refreshed, it's a visual indication that it has been, in fact, refreshed. So this is what the supervise window looks like. You can actually change settings on your entire set of iPads. So we have, again, 65 in our all devices, and you can actually see that 22 are currently connected to Apple Configurator, and you can just view those and just change settings on those. The nice thing is you can actually change settings at this point, and the next time the iPad is plugged in, it will adhere to those settings. So that provides a nicety. And of course, you've got a refresh button down here, so even though it'll automatically refresh whenever you plug in, you can refresh from scratch if you want. You know, I get all 40 in and I decide I want to refresh them all right now, I can do that. That's nice. So this is the profile that we created. And again, we were just looking for clean OS install with full functionality, so we did not restrict very much about this. General information here, and I want to draw your attention to just these two lower boxes, and it's security controls when the profile can be removed. We don't want that. Automatic removal of profile, we don't want that either. So both of those are set to never. And then the restrictions are actually, we really only unchecked one box. So this is what the full list of functionalities looks like. And I'll draw your attention to a single one, which is allow erase all content and settings. That's the only one that we disallowed. And the reason for that is when you enable that, you can actually, your student can actually do a full erase and erase your profile as well. And so we're back to square one. We have to resupervise, you know, the whole nine. You really have to start from scratch on an iPad if you allow erase all content and settings to be enabled. Apps, again, these are just for your perusal because we didn't uncheck anything. So whenever you're in Apple Configurator, you can obviously see what all of these are. Some of them are unchecked by default, and for the sake of security or those types of things, I went ahead and checked them. Again, media content, the last one was apps. And then just for the sake of showing you everything that we set up, we have an open Wi-Fi network that's available to our students called UWNet. So we had that auto set up so that we could have a student check out an iPad and start using it almost immediately. A screen pops up that says log in with your UW credentials, and they do, and they're in. So that's nice, and most campuses have that. So it's kind of an expectation, I suppose, from a student standpoint. All right. So here's the setup. So the refresh station was just a Mac Mini, server, Apple Configurator, all that, basically tricked out. I think it only has one hard drive, and I think it might be a spinning disk. But aside from that, it's a Mac Mini server. And the iPad connections that we need. So the iPad 2 30-pin and the Lightning connector. Now, that was actually the computer that I did all of my testing on. So I literally just moved it right into production. We registered all the iPads necessary, and then we set that up as our refresh station. So again, I had talked about retraining was a difficulty. What we tried to do was actually make it a physical move for our students so that muscle memory wouldn't be an issue. So the refresh station was here, Mac Mini, iPad connections there. You move over to the charging station, which has one of these Anchor USB charging hubs, so that we had 3 of them, so you could charge up iPads all at once, and I actually have a picture of it down here. And then all of the Lightning and 30-pin connectors that we might need. And then finally, the storage station was just a shelving unit where we had all the iPads that were then ready for checkout. So, you know, they could kind of work down the line, so to speak, and then once it's at the end, it's ready for checkout again. So, I'll read this one again to you verbatim. The old new process is what I call this one. This was rolled out in January 7th of 2015, so it was about 6 months later that I was able to get this rolled into production. And of course, again, doing tons of other things, so this was kind of a pet project for me, and so being able to get it out in 6 months was actually pretty good. Same lead student actually wrote this as well. So we're rolling out a new iPad image station, very much like the one we use for MacBooks. Most importantly, we no longer need patrons to put in their passcodes or log out of iCloud. Here's how the reset process works. When a patron returns an iPad, check that all the pieces are there and discharge. In the back, there's a Mac Mini with both a 30-pin iPad 2 cable and Lightning iPad Air cable. Plug it into the iPad. And plug in the iPad to the Mac Mini, and it will automatically begin to reset the iPad. Please note, only one iPad can be connected to the Mac Mini at one time. When the iPad is done resetting, it will make a bell noise, the ding, or glass sound that I showed you before, and it is ready to be recharged and then circulated again. Additional note, we have new chargers, she's talking about the Anchor USB hubs, for the iPads that are going to be permanently on the back table. No need to take the charger out of the case except to check that it's there. So that's nice. You know, in comparison to the 9-step one, that's pretty good, actually. I probably could have left it there and been perfectly fine. But there were problems. So, finite number at a time. She talked about you can only plug in one iPad at a time. That's technically inaccurate. You know, you can plug in one to the 30-pin connector, one to the Lightning connector, but the problem is that there's a finite number of USB ports. And the moment you start working with USB hubs that aren't powered and things like that, you start to worry about failure. The storage problems. I'm not sure if you saw in one of the pictures, there was a blue bin that was labeled iPads to be reset. That bin is tiny because our expectation was as they got checked in and there was a lull, someone would come back and reset them, but that's simply not the case. So they would pile up at that station, the refresh station, and then they would pile up at the storage station because we could only plug in 15 at a time, and then they would, you know, never make it back to the storage station. And so we had people like hurrying to reset them as they're about to go check them out. And that's, again, if a customer gets like a 30% battery on an iPad, they're probably not going to be happy with it. Retraining the muscle memory. Like I had said previously, we tried to make it very distinct at each of the stations. And we had problems with students actually doing nothing. They would check in an iPad and then just put it back on the shelf. Because, well, we don't need to do the full factory reset anymore. And it's like, no, like there's a process. You've been told about the process. And unfortunately, it just was hard to retrain that muscle memory for a select few. We had software errors. iCloud was locked out because of a checkbox I didn't know existed. And so I thought I was turning off a potentially issue creating Find My iPad feature, and I instead just turned off iCloud entirely. And so I got students within a couple of days asking, like, why can't I log in? This is basically useless without my iCloud account. Or this is basically useless without me being able to restore from my backup, or those types of things. No ding differentiation. The ding was good for completion, I thought. It also dings for errors. And originally, I had wanted the Mac Mini to be a headless system. So they plug it in, they don't have to worry about the software or anything like that. It would just run, and if there were problems, I would actually go into the server via ARD or VNC, fix the problem, and then go about my business. That simply wasn't the case. I couldn't do it that way. Because there was no way to, make an sound or make the sound different based on completion versus error. And then we didn't have the background initially. So there was no visual completion indication. When a student picked it up, it's like, yeah, this looks about right. But if someone hadn't changed the background, or if they didn't know what the default background was, they would just go ahead and check it right back out, even though it potentially had ended with an error. So these were things that we needed to take into account in our final setup. So our final setup looks like this. Beautiful, no? That's a Bretford PowerSync cart, PowerSync plus cart 40. So this is just for our iPad Airs, and you can see the Mac Minis plugged in there. We actually still do the stations for our iPad 2s. So there is a 30-pin iPad connector that goes to the top of the cart that they can plug into and move through that process still. But with the iPad Airs, now we can hook up all 40 of our iPad Airs, get them charged up, get them refreshed, etc. It all works very seamlessly. We still have some of the issues of errors occurring and things like that, but I'll get to that in a second. So the iPad cart and the Mac Mini, that's it. And then the case storage is just bins with empty cases now, because the iPads sit in the cart until they're ready to be checked out again. Pretty slick. So you can see the bin there, iPad Air cases. We try and make it foolproof. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to read to you what this sign says here. So it says, steps to reimage iPad Airs. And now there's an asterisk. iPad 2s will continue to be reset using the 30-pin adapter on top of the cart. 1, remove iPad from case, place case in bin. Plug iPad into the cart and place it in an open slot. iPad can be left in cart until checkout. That's it. It's really nice. Steps to checkout. Grab a case from the bin. Remove an iPad with a green light, blinking or solid. Check to make sure iPad has re-imaged properly, and check that all pieces are in the case. That's it. Seems pretty easy. Unfortunately, it seems pretty easy. All right, so the new process. Again, I'll read it to you verbatim again. This is the blog post that was actually then written by me because it was yet another change about the iPads. I will read you the original before I read you the edit, just for the sake of clarity. Recently, we purchased an iPad cart that allows us to do some pretty cool things with our iPads. I'm trying to talk it up. This morning, I have successfully rolled out the iPad cart for daily use. The check-in procedure will remain the same with iPad 2s, except that the 30-pin connector is now on top of the cart. The iPad Air checkout system will change a bit. See the instructions on the cart. A few things you need to keep in mind when using the new cart. 1, it is for only iPad Airs. 2, iPad Airs cannot stay in their cases in the cart. As such, we will be keeping empty iPad Air bags on the old shelves for now, and as you saw, we rolled out the bins relatively quickly. When iPad Airs need to be checked out, you will need to pair an empty case with an iPad out of the cart. 3, the cart does not guarantee that no errors will occur with the new reset process. You will still be expected to check the iPads or the Mac Mini prior to checkout that they have been reset properly. We have had quite a few iPads that we have needed to reset the old way because they have not been reset properly. Please pay attention to the condition the iPads are in prior to checking them out. 4, the cart has indicators showing the current stage of a given iPad Air. Flashing lights mean the iPads are currently connected to Apple Configurator. Solid lights mean they are charging. Green is fully charged, orange is not. So to review, for iPad Airs, you will want to simply take the iPad Air out of the bag, find an open slot in the iPad cart, and plug it in and put the bag on the old shelf. That's it. If you have any questions about this or any other iPad processes, please let the CMC management or the leads know. Thanks. And then the edit. Apparently the iPad cart can't decide what it wants to do with the lights, whether they should continue blinking or be solid. Here's what you need to know. Blinking lights mean an iPad is still connected to the Mac Mini, while a solid light means the iPad is not connected to the Mac Mini but is still charging. All you need to do is check the iPad to make sure it is re-imaged correctly, because some are failing, and that it has a green light, blinking or solid. And if it meets both of those, it's good to go. Again, pretty simple. And that edit was actually done by one of our student leads, because she came to me and said, I don't know what these lights mean. And I said, write a blog post about it. So it works out. So here are the secondary takeaways from this. The system items. We wanted our students to continue to check for errors. And of course, you have this newfangled cart, there's this expectation that, oh, all of our problems are solved. And that's unfortunately not the case. The blinking lights obviously had to be addressed because people were confused about what exactly they meant. And the cart comes with an iOS app that I thought I would be using. Oh yeah, all of our iPads are refreshed successfully and done charging and are ready for checkout or something of that nature. I mean, pie in the sky ideas. And unfortunately, there just wasn't a good viability to my personal use of the app. However, in your use case, you might find use in it if you end up with that type of cart. And they've actually come up with an upgrade to that cart that makes it even better, in my opinion. Some administrative items. Scalability is obviously going to be an issue for us. If I have to roll out an additional 100 iPad Air 2s or iPad Air 3s or whatever they end up calling it down the line, this is not a great solution. Although I will say it's a better solution than the 9-step process that we began with. But scalability is something that I will have to deal with, and it's something where we'll go back to the no, no, no checklist that I made because we don't own the technology, and we'll try and see if those are actually no's. And then what's next? You know, I talked about the fact that we were starting from a clean slate. Clean OS, updated OS, like these were pretty low-hanging fruit. And so what's next is pretty simple for me. Let's see, I wrote them down. We want to provide apps that can potentially tie into our other services. Think like 3D modeling on an iPad, and then you can send it into us for a 3D print. That'd be really cool. Think poster design for then large format printing right on an iPad. That would be cool again. In addition, we want to provide access to the apps that our students might not potentially want to purchase, which is something that we already do on our lab machines. So, you know, we provide access to $1,000 software packages. We want to be able to provide them with access to things that they may simply want to use once or try out or any of those types of things. Try before you buy, in a sense. We'll need to expand. I'd like to research networking multiple Mac Mini servers for this use. So the iPads would actually be registered to, for all intents and purposes, multiple Mac Minis at once. And then if we do expand to 2 carts at some point, when we do get more iPads, we should be able to maybe plug into any cart. Yes? Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Get loaded on to what you've got. There's no reason they couldn't just sign out of that Apple ID and install whatever they want.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and again, like these are issues that we haven't necessarily fully thought through because currently they do just log in with their Apple ID and they install whatever apps that they currently own, and we expect them to own it. But yeah, we can preload. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'd like to be able to also have a test setup where I can say test future updates, because I'm not sure if you guys have checked into the updates to Apple Configurator or LCAP. They're huge. Yeah, they're huge. It's a completely different interface, and some of the updates in iOS 9 will allow us to some more flexibility in all of this. Of course, I wrote this entire keynote before the announcement, before I was able to log into my Apple developer account and actually download and start playing with them. But yeah, so the idea is that I want the malleability of our process to be such that I can not worry about future updates.
Have you looked at using MDM servers for over-the-air pushing, so you don't have to buy the cart, you just have charging stations?
Sure. The question was, have I looked into MDM for over-the-air management, so I would really just need the charging stations instead of the carts? And the answer is initially we did. We did look into it, and again, one of the things that we had kind of taken into consideration initially was cost. And so this was, for all intents and purposes, free. The cart was obviously a cost, but that was really the only cost that we had. Everything else we had already kind of put in motion, or they were low enough costs where it was basically nothing to our economy people, finance people. All right.
Just one other question. You said
Yeah.
you don't own the technology.
Yes.
Does that mean who does it?
The Info Labs, the Department of Information Technology. So we own it in the sense that we, just like we are Penn State, I am a part of UW-Madison. So UW-Madison owns it, but I don't handle cutting POs, I don't handle any of that, and it's actually an external entity that does. So thank you for your attention. I've got about 20 minutes, and I'd love to spend it doing some questions. I've got my information up here. I've got cards up here. As I said, this is actually one of the iPads that we check out, so if you want to come check it out, you can. Thank you. Yes?
How long does it take to do the refresh from backup and ready to go?
So the question was, how long does it take to go ahead and do the refresh? So are you saying like a current iPad that we're checking out, like I'm going to take this back, check it in, and refresh it? Is that what you're asking? Okay. It takes about 4 minutes. I mean, it's a clean OS install with a profile, so it doesn't take long. It's pretty nice. It's standard. Yep, just standard. And actually, I had looked into just getting the bare minimum on our iPad Airs, the like keynote pages numbers sets, and that was even difficult because I couldn't prove that I owned the iPads. So, yes?
What's the percentage of failure for restores when they just plug into that?
So the question was, what's the percentage of failures for restores? I don't have an exact number. I can't say that because most of the time our leads are troubleshooting right away. But I would say if I haven't rebooted the Mac Mini in, say, a month, every so often you'll see like a 50% failure rate. And I've just simply dealt with that by restarting, and it seems to work okay. Yes?
Have you had any of your iPads come back activation locked or you skip the process?
Yeah.
Skip and you cannot get the student to come back to unlock it for you? We just had that
One.
recently.
Can you put it in DFG mode?
Unfortunately not. You have to contact Apple and get an activation unlocked. So, sorry, for everyone, the question was, have we ever had an iPad come back that was activation locked and the student would never come back, in other words. And yes, we had one that was out of commission for a month and a half or so. It was right at the end of the spring semester. And the email address of the person that had checked it out, we were worried was actually back in China. And so we were like, okay, well, we won't have this for the summer. Turns out that it actually had been activation locked for a much longer time, and no one had caught it, strangely. Our students should have noticed, like, hey, this is at the Hello Services setup screen. This isn't right, and jumped on it that way, but it just didn't work out that way. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Just as an advice, what kind of card would you have chosen if money wouldn't have been such a issue?
I don't know. The cart that we used, the question was, if money was no object, would I have chosen a different cart? I have to say, looking at some of the carts that I did, the Bretford was on par with all the others. And they were all about the same price. I mean, give or take a few $100s maybe. But it did exactly what we needed it to do. And my only issue with it, and the upgrade or the next version of the cart has actually taken care of this, was it's a black box. You can't really get in to the back of the cart. And they've changed that because now they realize, I'm sure, they're working with system administrators that want to be able to unplug stuff, if possible. So.
What happens if, connectors where?
So it's actually a modular design. It's pretty ingenious. The connector is, let's see if I can pull it up here. Because it's kind of hard to see here, but the connector is actually connected at the light above the iPad. It's not a single continuous cable. And so we could actually replace just the connection from the cart to the iPad, that 2 or 3 inch move. So that it's a good design, definitely. Yes?
So we just got one of these same carts, but I haven't looked into the app yet. I know that it was available.
Yes.
You didn't like it. What were you expecting, and what was your issue with it?
Good question. So the question was, I didn't like the iOS app for the cart, and what was my issue with it? It's a good question. What was I expecting? Because it does basically what it says it does. But the problem was that the lights on this are what show up in the app. So, you know how I talked about the fact that like it was blinking or it wasn't, and there was no really rhyme or reason to which ones were blinking and which ones were solid. The app would show that the iPad 64 wasn't done yet for all intents and purposes. And it's like, oh, well, that's been in the cart for a week. Maybe I expected that it would have more useful features for my purposes specifically. I could see if you're rolling an iPad cart around a school, for instance, say an elementary school or a high school with a one-to-one program, that would be perfect because you can see which ones are connected, which ones aren't. It has I believe it has notifications for if the cart has been unplugged. Like there are some interesting ideas in it. Don't get me wrong. It's a very well-designed app as well, but it's not one that I could find utility in, I feel like. And it, again, as with this entire thing, it's very specific to my situation, not to say that this is a better cart than any other, not to say the iOS app wouldn't work for anyone else, etc. So, yes?
User data. So basically they're lending it out, it's returned, the users automatically think, they're like, okay, connection's gone. So basically was it like you have a concept for having them use their own Apple items for iCloud backups?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because it's a fully functional, clean install, they are still, for all intents and purposes, administrators. The only thing they can't do is erase. Because for whatever reason, there's no way to provide an erase and install, or what is it called? Erase all content and settings, I mean, that doesn't also erase the profile, which is where persistent profiles come in. And that's the device enrollment program that I looked into pretty heavily, and it would have literally been perfect for us because we just want to provide an iPad. But the persistent profile is only a thing that Apple can do for you, and it's only upon purchase.
That's not true anymore.
Oh, that's not true anymore.
The session I was just in about Z.
Yeah.
You can enroll any device back to 2011.
That's awesome.
You have a DEP
That's
number.
great.
You just give your Apple rep a list of serial numbers, and they will back enroll the devices so that as soon as they're factory refreshed
Wow.
and go through when you go through setup the system,
Yeah.
it forces the profile.
Oh, that's nice.
Through your MDM.
Yeah, exactly. That's really nice. Forget everything I said. Feel free, pack it up. Everyone, no, sorry.
The issue you're about to have, though, is that you will still have to prove you purchased it.
Of course. Yeah, that'll always be an issue for us until we work that out.
What they were explaining is the way that this works now is that the Department of IT would be the
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes.
and they can now subgroup and assign administrators on a department basis.
Interesting.
And say this group of units belongs to this administrator.
Yeah.
We can always override it, but you have full control of this group. And one of the things you can do is deactivate activation now.
Yeah. Interesting. Stay tuned for next year, Apple Configurator 2 and DEP. No, I'm joking. Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to be doing a deployment probably at the end of this month with to field technicians, and the company owner doesn't want to have to bring them back in at night. He wants to give them chargers. So
Sure.
these will be a fairly permanent assignment, other than the fact that there's turnover of people. So I was experimenting with a similar type of setup to what you were described. Also, then enrolling them into the MDM of the server we have.
Sure.
Now I'm kind of hearing and wondering about this. I'm a little hesitant, but have you done any experimentation with MDM? I know you didn't do it for this, but have you yourself done any experimentation with MDM?
Yes.
And Apple Configurator? Is this a good approach, or should I be looking at?
I use MDM. I use Cisco Rock, and originally, we're a small school district, we were school, we have 1,700 students. Everyone looked into DP, Apple Configurator, and Meraki. And for us, we are fairly liberal with our users. The iPads basically go out to students in grades K through 2. Apple Configurator at the time, and that was 2 years ago, and Cisco Meraki did not play well together, so DP was suggested. However, we went over to our IU, my director and myself, DP was a little bit too restrictive for us, so what we have used is Cisco Meraki, and we have used it on a free basis because of that. We own so many Cisco access. Now, I'm looking to really, from a profile management standpoint, and creating a profile, that's something I don't really doesn't do well. I really like to use an Apple Configuration foundation for MDM with Cisco Meraki. I really like the Meraki feature because I can raise, swipe, lock, push apps to VPP, but I don't like the fact that I can't make standard configuration. But the mobile management, the cloud management, I can across the air pull up an iOS stick, whatever iOS they're on, where they're at, GPS locator. That's a nice feature, but I do want to look into the Apple Configurator in combination with MDM because, again, just for our environment,
Jamf also just rolled out, I think forget what it's called, but it's a small deployment version of Casper, which is significantly cheaper than deploying Casper Suite if you're business and not education. They do very cheap.
Yes.
But the nice thing is it comes with a 3 iPad trial. I'm actually using it to manage my 2 daughters' iPads, just to give it a shot and see how it works.
Cool.
And it's if you have a deployment, I think it's less than 50 devices overall, then you can use this, and it's dirt cheap as far as cloud management. It does work with DEP. One of the things that was laughable kind of in the session, because the session was given by Apple that I was just at, was that they told me that their own profile management server doesn't work with DEP. You have to actually have a full-on MDM solution.
Okay.
I'm using that now.
Yeah, DEP won't work. At least that's what they just said.
Any other questions?
Is there a UPS in that case?
Or do you have one?
I have an external one, but I'm trying to think if there is. I believe they might have a version that has built-in UPS functionality, but because it's a black box, there's no way to service a UPS if there was one in mine.
I was just thinking like with the app.
True. Yeah, and I assume that they have some type of functionality for that. I don't know. Yeah, the server would, yeah. Sure. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good one.